Okay, today's daf is Masechta Zvachim Daf Ayin Gimel. So it's going to be a very short daf. It may take us like 15, 20 minutes. All these dafim are very, very short here in the Masechta. So
No problem.
basically, yeah, I mean, look, this is what we're discussing over here. We learned in the Mishnah said that this animal, let's say this animal killed, as you can see on the screen, one sheep that killed a human being. So you're supposed to stone that animal. You're not allowed to benefit anymore from that animal. If it got mixed up with a bunch of carbon oiler animals, a bunch of carbon oiler sheeps, the Mishnah says that you kill all the oiler sheeps. You let them die. You can't bring them as a carbon. So the Gemara is troubled by that because look at all these oilers, and you're going to say that just because you have one little sheep that gets mixed up with a bunch of carbon oilers, we're going to say, oh, you can't bring the carbon oilers onto the Mizbeach. What happened to the concept of bittul baroiv, right? If a drop of milk falls into a pot of chicken soup, you say bittul baroiv. So how come you don't say bittul baroiv over here? So the first teretz that the Gemara is trying to say is that the sheep some people, will, when they transact with sheeps, they sell it individually. They'll never sell you, a flock of sheep. They'll sell you 75 sheep. So they have an exact number. So something that you count and has exact number um, is does not become bottle. It shows that it's importance, and when something's important, it can never become nullified. Yes, that's the one answer. But the Gemara doesn't like that answer, or the Gemara says that's only according to one opinion, because there are people who sell flocks of sheep. They will not count the sheep. They'll just sell you a whole flock of sheep. So even though most people will sell sheep counting it, but there's some that don't. So according to that opinion, that's not enough to make it a davar chashiv. That's not enough to make it a prominent. And they're just expressing their opinion according to Rab Meir. So the Gemara is saying right now is we're going to start from Ein Gimel Lamed Aleph, that there is an opinion that says that as long as a little bit, even if like 10% of people sell it individuals, individual, even that will make it something that doesn't become bottle. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, there is an opinion like that. Okay, the Tanya we learned in a, I'm going to show a picture of what we're talking about over here. Here is a guy who has a fig, a dried fig of truma, and there's a bunch of jars of dried figs, truma, and he knows he put the truma figs, this truma fig, into the into the into figs that are not truma, let's say. So so now what do you do? He doesn't know which jar he put it into, and but he knows it could be on the top. So does it become bottle? That's the question. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, litra ketzias, if you have a bunch of dried figs, a pound of dried figs, let's say, and I'm just using one, shadarsa al pi eagle, you pressed it into a round jar. Ve'eni yadeya be'eze eagle drasa, and you don't know which jar you put in the dried fig, or al pi chavius, or if it's a barrel and you put a dried fig in the barrel, and you don't know which barrel you put the dried fig in. And there's other figs in the barrel. Al pi kaveris, you put it into a basket, right? You don't know which barrel did you squash the figs in. So now you have a problem because one of the jars, let's say, is also because it has a truma on top of it. It has a fig of truma, but you don't know which one it is. But one thing you do know is that if you did put truma, it's going to be on top of the barrel. So what about Rameir says Rameir said like this. Rameir is saying, I heard that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Royan esel yoines ki iluhem prudois, v'achtartoines malas esel yoines. Basically, he says that you don't need 100 barrels. All you need is to know that there's 100 figs in each barrel, and we view them that they're all separate and mixed up together, and therefore that one fig will become bottle in the rest of the rest of that jar. That's the opinion of Meir. Even though technically you put it on top, Rabbi Lezer says you view it as it's a mixture, and the bottom figs, males elyonis, mevatel, they nullify the top fig, and therefore everything is permitted. Rabbi Shua says no. You know that you put it on the top of a jar. So then he says you need 100 jars. In order to make this work, you need 100 jars. Rabbi Shua says, if you have 100 open jars, then the figs become bottle. Dim lav, but if you don't have that, hapum asurim, what's on top of the jar is always aser. That means and the bottom ones are going to be mutter. So basically, according to Rabbi Shua, you would have to have 100 jars. If you have 100 jars, then you can eat all of them. But if you don't have, then the top of each jar, we assume you put the truma in any one of these jars. So you don't eat the figs that are on top of the jars, but you could eat the figs that are on the bottom of the jars. That's what he says. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion of the machloikis between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer em yesh sham kupum yalabim la pum asar. Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi Yeshua. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer said what Rabbi Meir said, Rabbi Yeshua said, that you need 100 jars in order for that fig to be mutter. For that,
But if you have 100 jars and each jar only has one fig,
what do you?
each one is one fig, is it still bottle?
No. Is it still bottle? If you have
100 jars, one
yes,
fig in each jar.
yes, that would be bottle because
Okay.
because it's
Okay.
jars that are mixed up, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. That makes
Okay.
sense. But Rabbi Yeshua, this opinion says, Rabbi Yeshua says that these figs, you see these figs, they never become bottle, no matter what. Why? Because some people, very few people, will sell them like, you sell the peanut chew one at a time for 10 cents or 20 cents. So some people sell it like that. So therefore, these figs are so chashiv that people sell them individually sometimes, very rarely, and therefore they never become bottle. Rabbi Shua says, in Yesham Shlolish Meas Pumim, even if you have 300 jars, open jars, lo yalu, they never become bottle. Because something that is sold by a unit, not by weight, even though only a few people sell it pieces, it never becomes bottle. So Rabbi Yeshua will be the author of our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? That the reason that since there's very few people, but there are people, I mean, quite a few people, more than a figs, that will sell sheeps individually, even though not everybody sells sheeps individually. Some will sell it as a flock, but because there are some people that sell it as a unit, therefore a sheep that gets mixed up with other sheep does not become bottle. The Mishnah, this is like a parenthesis. Durasa beigel ve'ini day be'ezimokom beigel durasa ilitzvoina lidrama. Let's say you squashed it into the jar, and it's not on the top anymore. And then you don't know. It could be on the bottom of the jar, the north of the jar, the south of the jar. Diviyakol yalo. Then everybody would agree that it's bottle, because if you stuffed it into the jar all the way down and you don't know which one it is, then everybody agrees it's bottle because it's not on top of the jar. But the bottom line is, that's the author of our Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua says figs will never become bottle because it's sold by a unit. Ravashi gives a new teretz. Ravashi says the reason why by the sheep it doesn't become bottle, because a sheep is a live animal. It's a live creature. And live creatures never become bottle. Even if you want to say Rabbanim, that Rabbanim hold that generally nothing becomes bottle. Even only special items like exotic fruit, that will never become bottle. but most things do become batal, but that's by inanimate objects. But Rabbanim would agree, balechayim, live creatures, chashivi, are important, but loy batli, and they never become nullified in the crowd. So that answers our Mishnah. That ends the topic of why the sheep getting lost in the crowd, the sheep, this Shara Niska getting lost in the crowd, asses all the sheep, no matter how many sheep there are. Says the Gemara, okay, the Gemara is asking a question. So you're telling me you can't bring any of those sheep for a carbon oila. So the Gemara's question is, V'nim shreich v'nikrav chad v'nayu. Call one sheep over and pull it out of the crowd, and you could assume, statistically speaking, that it was not the Shara Niskal, right? If you had to take a bet, you probably got an oila. And the name, let us say, called the parish. When you're separating something from the crowd, meruba parish, you're separating it from the majority. So therefore, when you pull it out, so the question is, why can't I bring any one of these as oilers? Just pull one from the crowd, and you can assume, statistically speaking, that is one of a carbon oiler, and you could bring it.
Can't you do that straight down the line so you get to the last two?
That's essentially what the Gemara's question is. Why don't you do that? Why do you say that nobody could bring any of the
Until you get to two left.
Right.
Statistically, you don't have the right one.
Right. That's what basically it. So the Gemara says the reason why you don't do that is for whatever reason. It's not logic over here. Nimshach, you wanted me to separate them out. Havola kavua. But the fact is that there's a halacha called kavua. If something is set in its place and is not moving, like the sheep, they're all sitting around in one place. We don't view it as a statistically majority. We go to Amid Beis. Kol kavua kamechsal mechsadami. Anything that's set in its own place is considered a 50-50 chance. Now, why is that? There's no svara to it, but let's say you have 10 butcher shops on Central Avenue, right? 9 are kosher, one is not kosher. And you come home one day and you went to the butcher shops and you went down Central Avenue, you bought meat. You don't know if you went into the 9 kosher ones, any one of the 9 kosher ones, or you went into the non-kosher. What do you do with the meat that you brought home? So we always have a halacha that since the butcher shops are set in their place, when you go and reach into that, we view it as a 50-50 chance. I'm not sure if there's a logic associated with that, or is a din drabanan, or it's we just suspend statistics and we view it as anything that's not movable in its place is a 50-50. So if you're going to pull one sheep out from that,
Does that mean you couldn't eat the meat?
you couldn't eat the meat. You can't eat the meat.
Okay.
That's the rule. Chol kavua, anything that's in its place, that's set and didn't move, and you went to buy the meat and you brought it home, so we view it as it's a 50-50 chance that you brought home non-kosher meat. So the Gemara says, okay, then I have a way to not make these sheeps in one place. What do I do? How about this? Shoot a bullet or whatever in the air and make them all separate. And now you take one of those sheeps and bring them in as an oila. You see that? Let's do something, make a rustle now, and force them to move around. And then we'll say the name of them. We will say called the parish, meruba parish, anything that's separated from the majority. Answers the Gemara, you're right. So let's say that you grab 10 animals, and you're going to say, statistically speaking, they're all separate, and therefore they're so separate, they're all running around, and they're not in one place, and therefore called the parish, meruba parish. It's from the majority that are oila. But maybe when they're going to slaughter the animals and come to the Mizbeach, they're going to be at the same time, the 10 Kahanim are going to be holding their blood of these animals and ready to sprinkle it on the Mizbeach. So then it's back into one place again. It's being located onto the Mizbeach. And now you have a 50-50 chance that the blood that's on the Mizbeach is from a Shar HaNizkal. is from the non-kosher animal. So that's what Gemara says. Amarava gezerah shema yavo yud kehanim bevas achas v'yikrevu. Maybe you're right, but 10 kahanim are going to grab those animals, and they're going to slaughter them, and then at the same time they're going to bring them on the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, wait a second, why would it aser again? When you bring them onto the mizbeach, when you sprinkle it onto the mizbeach, you're going to say it's aser. When you grab the animal, you say you grabbed an oila. Now that you bring it all at the same time on the mizbeach, every animal that you grabbed, you're going to slaughter it, and at the same second you're going to bring it onto the mizbeach. You're going to say now it becomes now a kavua and it becomes re-aser again. Once something becomes mutter, it's mutter. Once something is roiv, we will say that it's lost already. You can't make it reappear as aser again. So the Gemara says no. Mishum shema yavo yud kahanim b'vas achas v'yikol. Maybe 10 kahanim will grab an animal at the same time. So if you have the picture over here, okay, if 10 kahanim grab the animal at the same time, it will become like a kavua. It will become like in one place. If you have 10 kahanim grabbing each at the same time an animal, so the Gemara says that's impossible. Kahanim asara kahanim b'vas achas mi efshar. Is it possible you'll have 10 kahanim grab moving animals at the same time, all exactly at the same time? Allah Amarava, the Rava says no. Mishum kavua. Gzera is like this. That the truth is that if the gzera is that if you allowed them running around, people will say, okay, you don't have to make them run around. Even if they're not running around, you can take one animal and bring it as a carbon oiler. And there's a big difference. When they're not moving around, it's 50-50. When they're moving around, you say it's batal b'raiv. So because of that gezerah, we didn't allow, once the animal gets mixed up, we don't allow you to bring any of the animals as a carbon oiler. Okay, so now that's the bottom line. The bottom line is that once this animal gets mixed up with all the other animals, for whatever reason, Chazal said, Chachamim said, don't bring any of the animals as carbon oilers. Amarava. So now comes a new case, and this will take us another 2 minutes, and that's it. Amarava. What happens if somebody didn't listen to Chazal? Instead, what he did was he brought all these animals as carbon oilers. Does the owner get a kapara? In other words, does the owner of these animals, each one had an individual owner, does he have to bring a new carbon? Or you can say, no, the kohen that took it and brought it up on the mizbeach anyway. So I got my kapara. Rava said, Hasha da Amir Rabbanan loy nakriv. Now that the rabbis told us that you can't bring it as a carbon, nakriv, if you're going to bring it as a carbon, loy maratza, you don't get the forgiveness. And the owners have to pay for a new carbon, even though the kohen took it and brought it onto the mizbeach anyway. So the Gemara says, how do you know that? Esvei Rabbi Huda Rava, Rav Huna asked the question to Rava. There's a Mishnah that says in Masechta Kinim, you have two birds. One's a chatas, one's an oila. Now, as we learned, an oila bird is brought, sprinkled on the top of the mizbeach, or squashed onto the top of the mizbeach. The service done to a chatas bird is done on the bottom of the mizbeach. Now the question is, chatas is arva ba'oila. You have, let's say, one carbon bird chatas that got mixed up with a bird oila. The oila is arva b'chatas. It goes the other way around. Afila achas b'riboy, yubosu kulem, you kill them all. Okay, even if one of them got mixed up with 10,000 of the other other type. But But kohen that asks a question, we tell him, don't bring any of the birds on the mizbeach. But here's the point. If a kohen did not listen to us and brought both birds, let's say, onto the mizbeach. So asan lamal, if he did the service on top of the mizbeach, so then for sure he did an oila. So mechza kosher, mechza pasul. Then half of it, the ones that are an oila are kosher, and the ones that are chatas, he has to buy a new one. Lamata, if he brought it on the bottom of the mizbeach, So then, mechza kasha, mechza pasal. The ones that he was supposed to bring a chatas, he was yaitse, and the one that was supposed to bring an oila, he has to rebring it because he didn't do it correctly. So fine, and that's the point. Even though the Chachamim said don't bring it because they're mixed up, you don't know which is the oila, which is the chatas. If you took both of them and put it on top of the mizbeach, you for sure were yaitz the oila. And if you brought both of them on the bottom of the mizbeach, you for sure were yaitz the chatas, but not the oila. But if you did what? Achas lamata, achas lamal, you did one on top and one on the bottom, then both birds are puzzle. Shneim psulas. You didn't do anything. Shani oime, because I say chatas kreva lamala, that you brought the chatas, you did it totally wrong. Chatas you brought on top and there's beach. Voila kreva lamata, and the oila you brought on the bottom is beach. But the bottom line is, Rava said that if a kohen did not listen to anybody and brought all these oilas to the on the mizbeach, the owner did not get a kapara. And here, by the birds that got mixed up, we say that a kohen that did not ask any questions and brought it onto the mizbeach, you were yoitz at least your oil or your chatas. So how do you reconcile the Mishnah and Kinim with what Rava said? So the Gemara says, Ella aha, that's not true. It's not a question. Ha command the Amma balchayin nitchin. Rava was going according to the opinion that holds that once an animal gets disqualified, it's forever rejected. If an animal gets disqualified, and here it's got disqualified, the halacha is it's forever rejected. But the Mishnah in Keenum follows the opinion that says kan man de'ama balachayim, an animal, a bird, or whatever, einin nidachem, will never get totally rejected. If it's disqualified, but somehow you do it reappears as a kosher carbon, then you could bring it. It never gets totally rejected. So Rava said, I go like the opinion that says, Balechayim nidachim, that once a live animal has a disqualification, then it's forever rejected, and you can never get a kapar with it. And that's my opinion. Says the Gemara, one last question. Hare shchutin, when the kuli alma nidchem, when an animal is slaughtered, right? When an animal is slaughtered, everybody holds that once it's disqualified, it's forever rejected, right? And so therefore, if it's forever rejected, then you should not get a kapara. Utnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Rab Leza Oimer, we go to Andal Aleph, Im Karav Haroy Shel Echemhem Yikruvu Kol Harashim, that once you didn't listen, if an oilus got mixed up with the head of chatases, if you're not supposed to bring it on the mizbeach. But if you do it all, then fine, everything will be okay. But why should that work? Once something that's slaughtered is disqualified because it's mixed up with other karbonos, how could you say that you could, if you bring it up on the mizbeach, you did okay? Answers the Gemara, this is a rogue opinion. Who the Amar kachanana mitzri, Reb Lazar holds like Chanan HaMitzri, and this will end. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, Chanan HaMitzri Oimer. Chanan HaMitzri said that afilu dam bakais maybe chaveiro mizavik loy. Chanan HaMitzri is of this opinion. You know that there's a lottery held on Yom Kippur between the two goats, right? One goat they shechted on the and brought the blood inside the mizbeah, inside the sanctuary, and one goat on Yom Kippur they sent it to the Azazel and they threw it down the mountain. What happens? They slaughtered the goat, and now they have the blood in a cup of the one that's supposed to be brought into the sanctuary. And the goat that was supposed to be thrown off the mountain, the Azazel goat, the Sir Hamishtaleyach, died. So now, do you have to bring two new goats and make a new lottery again? So the Rabbi Chanan HaMitzri says, no, just bring one other goat and call that the Sir Hamishtaleyach. You don't have to make a new lottery. So we see the Chanan HaMitzri holds that even if it's the animal is slaughtered and becomes disqualified for a moment because it doesn't have a partner, if you make it kosher again by attaching a new partner to it, it becomes re-kosher again. It's not totally rejected, and therefore it could be brought on the mizbeah. So that's the opinion of Chanan HaMitzri. The bottom line is Rava, who said that if you're going to bring any of these sheep on the mizbeach, the owners do not get a kapara because he holds once they're disqualified. Chacham said they're disqualified. Don't bring them on the mizbeach, even If you do bring them on the Mizbeach, Rav will hold that they're forever rejected, and the owners do not get a kapara. Okay, we'll stop over here.
Oh, thank you.